Should you rent or buy a house in 2025? Well, I can tell you in Utah, it is way less expensive to rent right now than it is to buy. But I'm going to give you a look at the numbers, and I'm also going to talk about how that looks in the future for you, whether you rent or buy. So let's jump into it. So like I said, dollar for dollar, it is cheaper every month to rent right now than it is to buy. And that's because we have record high sales prices in Utah. We have higher interest rates, and it's just getting more unaffordable for people to buy. So I'm giving you a look at the breakdown, talking the numbers, but also what that looks like in the future when you rent versus buy. But before I get into all of that, I want you to have a better idea of the numbers so you know what went into this. So throughout this video, I'm talking about the median sales price in Utah is just over $600,000 right now. So we're looking at a $600,000 sales price, putting 10% down on that, or $60,000, and a 6.79% interest rate, assuming you never refinance your house. Now, the other part of it is rental. I'm looking at a 3-bedroom rental, average rent in the state of Utah, but obviously that's going to fluctuate depending on where you live. And then looking at the average rental increase of 3.2%. And that's a pretty average number of what Utah has seen over the course of the last 10 or 20 years. So that's what we're going to project moving forward. Now, with buying a home, we're going to factor in a 5% appreciation each year. That's a little bit low from what our average has been the last 10 years, but we all know it's been a little crazy in 21 and 22, kind of throwing that off. So I'm going to go with a safe 5% appreciation on your home value year out over year. And then this is also assuming that you never refinance your house. Now, most people do refinance when rates go lower, but this calculation in these graphs I'm sharing with you today is based on just keeping that 6.79% interest rate for the life of the loan of 30 years. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at the numbers. Assuming what I just went over, your mortgage payment, and this can fluctuate. I'm not a mortgage broker. There's all kinds of factors that go into it, but let's just call it, like at face value, your mortgage payment's going to be just over $3,100 a month. And to keep it simple, let's just say that never changes the whole course of the loan, which is not likely because of the cost of insurance affecting your mortgage payment, property taxes, things like that. But like I said, let's just keep it simple. $3,100, just over $3,100 a month for the life of the loan. And with rental price increases, I'm going to put this graph up here so you can actually see and visualize. The orange line here is your rental prices, and that's averaging $1,650 per month right now for a 3-bedroom in 2025. And then factoring in that 3.2% average rental increase year over year. So you can see by the year 2055, which is 30 years from now, with inflation averages and all of that, you're looking at rental rate of just over $4,200 per month. Now, why did I pick 30 years? Because most people do a 30-year mortgage. So you can see here that once your mortgage is paid off, you're basically saving $4,200 a month if the rental rates go the way that is projected. So you're saving a good amount of money every month when you hit 30 years. But you can see at about 20 years in 2045 is where you start to break even, where your rental price is pretty equivalent to what you would be paying rent and mortgage, or kind of that break even. But again, that's assuming you don't refinance. And most people refinance at least once while they're living in their home. But what's really eye-opening is I want to show you this second graph. And what this is looking at what your home is worth. And it also is going to break down how much you're losing. And I say losing, but how much more it's costing you to rent versus buy, or buy versus rent. So take a look at this graph. Now, these numbers are every 5 years that you see here. So in 2025, you purchase a $600,000 house, and it's actually costing you, you can see in red, said, $1,461 more per month having that mortgage than it is renting. But look, in 5 years, in 2030, that gap is getting lower. So now you're about $1,180 more per month having that mortgage. But your home is now worth $765,000, almost $766,000. Again, this is taking into average inflations, average increases in rent, and appreciation. So you see where it turns green and you're actually getting ahead $515 a month less expensive to have this mortgage than it is to rent by the year 2050. So like I said, in about 25 years, you're actually going to be ahead and breaking even in 20 years, getting ahead in 25. But take a look at the year 2060. So let's just say 5 years after your loan is paid off, you're saving almost $5,000 a month not paying rent. And your house is now going to be worth over $3 million at that point if the numbers work out the way, the appreciation is that I talked about. Now, I know you're probably thinking, Melissa, there's no way houses are going to be worth over $3 million in 35 years. Well, you got to remember, we said 35 years ago that houses weren't going to be worth 500,000, and here we are today. Wages increase, inflation goes up, all of that goes into these numbers that I factored in. Now, I will admit I cheated and asked ChatGPT to give me these average rate looking back 20 years and looking forward 20 or 30 years. So these averages are what ChatGPT told me. So, if you don't think these numbers are accurate and you're an economist, then, blame ChatGPT for those average numbers. So you might be asking yourself, why am I talking about this? Because I'm telling you, as a real estate agent, it's cheaper every month by almost $1,500 a month cheaper to rent than it is to buy. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I had an interesting conversation with somebody who was telling me how their uncle was always like the fun uncle and never settled down, didn't buy a house. Now he's in retirement and he's struggling to make the rent payments on his living, just everyday living in his retirement years. So it brought up a really good, interesting point that we often don't think about when we're young and buying a house is, what is that financial impact when my house is owned outright in 30 years? And what am I saving per month? So that's why I brought this up, to kind of take a look at the long term of it. Now, if you're not in a financial position to pay $1,500 more a month, totally understand that. Do not get yourself in a position where you're at risk of losing your house. That's the worst thing you can possibly do. But I do want to give you that food for thought of what inflation and prices are going to look like in 30 years by you continuing to wait. And then obviously, if you wait 5 years and buy, that number's just going to keep going up and those differences are going to change. But at least you are in a home that you're paying for yourself and making that huge amount of equity that you saw on the graph. So if you are thinking about making a real estate move, I'd love to connect with you. Shoot me a text or give me a call. That is the best way to reach me. But as always, make it a great day.